Sunday dinner was supposed to be a celebration, a toast to my older brother and his brand new baby. Instead, it became the exact moment my own flesh and blood looked across the mahogany table and tried to strip our 78-year-old grandmother of every single thing she owned. The dining room smelled like slow-roasted beef and fake smiles. Amber, his girlfriend, deliberately set her silver fork down. She announced her pregnancy, folded her perfectly manicured hands, and demanded Grandma sign over the deed to the house right then and there to secure a future for the firstborn. The room went completely dead. Nobody breathed. Then, down under the table, Grandma's frail, trembling hand found my knee. Her fingers dug into my skin. She squeezed 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Our secret childhood SOS signal. I forced my hands to stay perfectly still. I placed my silver fork quietly on the edge of my napkin. My name is Nora. I am 32 years old, and I spend my days teaching high school history. My brother expected me to shatter. He expected me to burst into tears, to beg, to throw a hysterical fit right there in the dining room. Instead, I looked David dead in the eye. He sat there swirling his wine, wearing this sickening, arrogant smirk. He leaned across the table and laid out his ultimatum. If Grandma refused to sign a power of attorney handing him total control of the property, he would drag her out of her own home. He promised to dump her in the most run-down, underfunded state nursing facility he could legally find. To twist the knife, he guaranteed she would never lay eyes on Amber's baby. It was a brutal threat. But the cruelty wasn't born out of simple greed. It was pure, frantic desperation. David was drowning. I knew exactly what he was hiding behind his expensive, tailored suit. He owed over $40,000 to an underground sports betting ring. Dangerous men were breathing down his neck, demanding their money. He needed a massive, immediate cash injection to save his own skin. And he had decided Grandma's lifelong home would be his personal lifeboat. He shot me a look of pure disgust, tossing out a snide remark about my broke teacher salary and how I could never afford to take care of her anyway. He thought my silence was submission. He assumed I was just a timid, pathetic little sister who would completely fold under his booming voice. He made a fatal miscalculation. I spend 40 hours a week managing manipulative, lying teenagers. I de-escalate screaming matches. I spot fake tears, forged signatures, and fabricated panic attacks before the morning bell even rings. Dealing with emotional terrorists is literally in my job description. The air in the dining room felt incredibly thin, pressing heavily against my chest. Underneath the table, my thumb gently stroked the back of Grandma's fragile hand, silently promising her she was safe. My heart beat in a slow, calculated rhythm. I wasn't the least bit scared of my brother. I simply picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and waited to see exactly how deep he was willing to dig his own grave. Amber pushed her chair back, the wooden legs shrieking against the hardwood floor. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, squeezing out a flood of perfectly timed, glittering crocodile tears. Her chest heaved. She launched into a theatrical, gasping monologue designed to paint herself as the ultimate victim. "You just can't stand it," she shrieked, pointing a trembling manicured finger directly at my face. "You're 32 and completely alone. You're just a bitter, jealous spinster trying to hoard this entire inheritance because you have absolutely nothing else in your pathetic life. My innocent unborn baby is going to be homeless because of your insane selfishness." The sheer volume of her voice rattled the crystal wine glasses. Grandma shrank into her chair. Her papery skin lost all its color, turning a sickly ash gray. Her knuckles were bone white as she clutched the edge of the table for dear life. The viciousness of the attack made the frail woman physically tremble. She looked up at David. She stared at her own flesh and blood, desperately searching his face for a single ounce of mercy or protection. David just casually crossed his arms, leaned back, and examined his fingernails, letting his girlfriend tear his grandmother to shreds. The urge to reach across the roast beef and drag Amber out the front door by her hair burned like battery acid in my chest. I clamped my teeth together. I forced the muscles in my jaw to relax. I let her fake sobs fill the heavy air of the dining room. Then, I stood up. I smoothed the wrinkles out of my skirt, walked slowly around the mahogany table, and stopped right behind Amber's chair. I placed a gentle, warm hand on her shaking shoulder. She instantly went rigid, totally unprepared for a peaceful reaction. I curved my lips into a soft, apologetic smile. "You know what, Amber? You are absolutely right," I said. My voice was smooth and even, masking the venom pumping through my veins. "I am being completely unreasonable. Pregnancy hormones make everything so incredibly overwhelming, and the absolute last thing you need right now is stress about your child's future." David dropped his hands to the table. His chest puffed out. The smug, victorious grin stretching across his face told me everything. He truly believed I had surrendered. He thought the broke, lonely teacher had folded under the weight of their combined cruelty. "Let's step into the kitchen," I suggested, giving Amber's shoulder a comforting squeeze. Let me put the kettle on and make us some nice hot chamomile tea. We can catch our breath away from the table and figure out exactly how to handle this paperwork peacefully. I guided Amber into the kitchen, letting the heavy oak door swing completely shut behind us. It severed us from the tense silence of the dining room. I walked straight to the stove. I flicked the burner on under the copper kettle. I kept my phone right in my pocket. I didn't need to touch it. It was already securely paired to the massive, high-definition Bluetooth soundbar sitting exactly 2 feet behind David's chair. I pulled 2 ceramic mugs from the cabinet. You really are a fantastic actress, Amber, I said. I kept my voice low, casual, pouring the hot water. But just between us girls, how exactly do you plan on keeping up a fake pregnancy for 9 full months? Amber let out a sharp, ugly snort. She leaned her hip against the cold granite counter, crossing her arms. The weeping, fragile victim vanished in a millisecond. This is the ultimate blind spot of a predator. Narcissists always die by their own illusion of power. They become so deeply obsessed with the sound of their own voice and their absolute certainty that they are the smartest person in the room. They view empathy as a weakness. They simply cannot fathom that the quiet, unassuming teacher they've been mocking is actually handing them a rope, patiently waiting for them to tie their own noose. Amber looked at me with pure, unadulterated pity. I don't need 9 months, sweetie. She sneered. Her voice dripped with poison. David already has the cash buyer lined up for this dump. Once your senile grandmother signs those papers, she goes straight into the absolute cheapest state ward we can find. We drain the accounts. By the time anyone asks about a baby, we'll be drinking margaritas in a Miami condo, and you'll still be grading spelling tests in a roach-infested apartment. She threw her head back and laughed. It was a vicious, victorious cackle bouncing off the kitchen tiles. Out in the dining room, that exact laugh blasted through the surround sound speakers at maximum volume. Every single vile word she just spoke echoed through the house like a thunderclap. The heavy kitchen door violently burst open. David stood in the doorframe. The arrogant smirk was completely wiped from his pale, sweating face. Behind him, Grandma sat perfectly upright at the mahogany table. Her tears were completely gone. Her eyes were stone cold. Amber's jaw dropped. The color drained from her cheeks as the reality of the live broadcast hit her. The silence now was deafening. They had absolutely nothing to say. No excuses. No fake tears. David grabbed Amber by the arm, dragging her toward the hallway. They snatched their coats and bolted out the front door like roaches scattering from the light. At exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, the heavy, rattling hum of a diesel engine violently shook our front windows. A massive moving truck parked directly on our front lawn, crushing Grandma's flower beds. The front door swung open. David barged inside, flanked by a brawny, thick-necked man in a cheap, shiny suit. This wasn't a standard real estate agent. This was a predatory cash-for-homes investor, the exact kind of bottom feeder who buys stolen properties for pennies to save desperate gamblers. David marched straight into the living room and slammed a thick, stapled document onto the coffee table. The top page bore a bright blue, official notary stamp. It was a quitclaim deed. He never needed Grandma's permission at the dinner table last night. He had already stolen her signature. A month ago, under the guise of helping her update her medical proxy forms, he slipped this exact deed into the stack. He tricked an elderly woman into signing away her lifelong sanctuary. He stood at the county clerk's office at exactly 7 o'clock this morning to officially file it. Pack her bags, David barked. His voice cracked with frantic, desperate adrenaline. He checked his gold watch, a thick layer of sweat, already pooling on his forehead. The loan sharks expected their cash by noon. He pointed a shaking finger toward Grandma's bedroom. You have exactly 2 hours to get out of my house. I locked eyes with him. I walked slowly over to the antique mahogany desk in the corner, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick, heavy red folder. I walked back and dropped it right on top of his fraudulent deed. Your signature is real, David, I said, my voice completely steady. The notary stamp is real. But that piece of paper is absolute garbage. He blinked, his mouth dropping open. 3 years ago, we transferred this entire property into an irrevocable living trust. I am the sole trustee. Grandma does not own this house on paper. She literally cannot sign it away to you, even if you put a gun to her head. The thick-necked investor stepped back. He recognized the legal trap instantly. He spat out a vicious curse and spun around to bolt for the door. I raised my phone, the camera lens already recording, the red light blinking directly at his face. I have your face, your company logo, and your license plates, I told him. If you are not sitting inside the downtown police precinct in exactly 20 minutes giving a sworn statement against my brother, I am sending this footage straight to the state real estate board. You will lose your broker's license forever. The investor shoved David violently into the wall. You swore to me you had full legal authority, he screamed. He sprinted out the front door, his car tires screeching down the asphalt a second later. Amber stood frozen by the doorway. The smug, fake pregnant girlfriend routine evaporated in a millisecond. She dropped her hands from her flat stomach, her eyes wide with sheer, animalistic terror. I didn't sign a single thing, she shrieked, backing away from David, like he was actively on fire. This was all his idea. She spun around to run. I stepped directly into the doorframe, blocking her only exit. Nice try, I whispered, holding my phone up to her face. The police already have the kitchen audio from last night. You are on tape, planning the exact execution of this theft. You are a full accomplice. David staggered backward. His knees hit the edge of the sofa, and he collapsed onto the cushions. The arrogant, booming dictator from the dinner table was completely gone. His face turned a sickening shade of chalky white. The reality of his failure crashed over him, suffocating the last bit of air in the room. The deed was completely worthless. The house was an impenetrable fortress, and the violent men he owed $40,000 to were going to find him long before he could ever scrape together bail money. David's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees right there on the floral living room rug. The arrogant dictator who had spent the last 24 hours terrorizing a 78-year-old woman evaporated into thin air. He morphed into a terrified, pathetic little boy begging for his life. He crawled forward. He grabbed the fabric of my skirt, sobbing uncontrollably. His hands shook violently as he pleaded with me to remember our shared blood. He babbled frantically about the dangerous men he owed $40,000 to, swearing they would literally kill him if he missed the noon deadline. He begged me to just sell the property, to save him, to act like a loyal sister. I stared down at him. Ice pumped through my veins. Filing that forged document at the county clerk's office this morning didn't win you a house, David, I said. My voice was a dead, flat calm. It won you a documented, airtight, and completely irreversible charge for felony elder financial abuse. His breath hitched. He froze, the tears stalling on his pale cheeks. Out on the street, the sharp, piercing wail of police sirens sliced through the morning air. I called Adult Protective Services and the downtown precinct the exact second his moving truck crushed the flower beds. They weren't arriving to break up a family argument. They were arriving to execute a felony arrest. I grabbed him by the collar of his tailored suit. I shoved him and his trembling girlfriend straight out the front door. They stumbled over the threshold, gasping for air on the front porch like fish thrown onto a hot dock. I looked my brother in the eyes one last time. I slammed the heavy oak door shut and forcefully slid the iron deadbolt into place. The loud, metallic click echoed through the empty hallway, sealing them outside forever. Inside, the house was perfectly quiet again. The heavy, suffocating tension completely lifted. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the absolute stillness wash over me. I turned my back to the door, walked straight into the bright kitchen, and poured Grandma a fresh, steaming cup of chamomile tea. The gavel struck the wooden block with a sharp, heavy thud that echoed through the cold courtroom. David did not get a simple slap on the wrist. Filing a forged real estate document to steal property from a vulnerable senior citizen is not a family misunderstanding. It is a severe, calculated crime. The judge sentenced my brother to 5 years in the state penitentiary, with absolutely no eligibility for parole for the first 36 months. The court also slapped him with restitution orders, totaling $25,000 to cover Grandma's legal fees and state fines. Amber tried to play the innocent, manipulated girlfriend in front of the judge, but the kitchen audio recording buried her. She took a desperate plea deal to avoid sitting in a cell. 4 years of strict probation, 300 hours of community service, and a permanent felony conspiracy record that instantly cost her her corporate marketing job. The legal system took their freedom, but the community completely dismantled their pride. Word spreads like wildfire in our hometown. The fake pregnancy lie unraveled publicly. Cousins and aunts who used to worship David's expensive suits and flashy cars completely severed ties. His prestigious country club membership was quietly revoked. Even the underground loan sharks he owed the $40,000 to realized he was a dead end behind bars. They swallowed the financial loss, but not before ensuring his name was permanently blacklisted across the city. He went from the arrogant golden boy of the family to a complete pariah in exactly 48 hours. Exactly 8 months after the heavy oak door shut on him, a thin, white envelope arrived in my mailbox. It bore the ink-stamped return address of the state correctional facility. The handwriting was jagged and rushed, but undeniably his. I stood in my quiet kitchen, tracing the edge of the cheap paper. I slid my thumb under the flap and pulled out a single, crumpled sheet of notebook paper. There was no apology written on those lines. Not a single word of remorse for terrorizing a 78-year-old woman. Instead, the page was dripping with venom and desperate guilt trips. He wrote about the sacred bond of blood. He claimed our late parents would be utterly disgusted with me for letting my own flesh and blood rot inside a concrete cell. He tried to twist the narrative, painting himself as the misunderstood victim of a cruel, vindictive younger sister. A year ago, those words would have shattered me. I would have lost sleep. I would have questioned my own sanity. But standing in the warm sunlight of my kitchen, I didn't feel a spike of rage. I didn't feel a crushing wave of guilt. I just felt a profound, absolute emptiness. He was a ghost trying to haunt a house that didn't belong to him anymore. I didn't write a furious reply. I didn't call the prison to scream at him through a glass partition. I simply folded the notebook paper in half, walked into my home office, and fed the letter directly into the roaring steel blades of my paper shredder. Sunday dinners look incredibly different now. The suffocating mahogany table is gone. The heavy, dark curtains have been pulled back to let the afternoon sun pour across the hardwood floors. The house no longer smells like fake smiles and quiet terror. It smells like fresh basil, roasted garlic, and loud, genuine laughter. Grandma is absolutely thriving. The deep, dark circles under her eyes have completely vanished. She spends her mornings tending to her rose bushes and her afternoons baking fresh bread. But we don't eat alone. Our dinner table is packed with my chosen family. My fellow teachers from the high school bring over huge bowls of pasta. My best friend since childhood sits in the exact chair David used to occupy, telling stories that make Grandma laugh until she has to wipe tears from her eyes. These are people who don't care about inheritances, property deeds, or bloodlines. They just care about us. The house is finally safe. I want to talk directly to you now. The gavel has fallen, the house is secure, and the legal battle is a closed file in a dusty cabinet. But the emotional scars left by familial betrayal do not disappear overnight. The darkest predators in our society do not always hide in dark alleys. Sometimes, they sit right across from you at the dinner table, passing the potatoes. People like David and Amber do not view the elderly as human beings with rich histories, deep fears, and fragile souls. They view them as expiring bank accounts. They view them as assets waiting to be liquidated, and their greatest weapon is the concept of family. They weaponize your shared history to bypass your boundaries, forcing you to tolerate levels of blatant disrespect and abuse that you would immediately report to the police if a perfect stranger did it. Society relentlessly drills into us that blood is thicker than water. We are conditioned from birth to forgive toxic family members at all costs, to keep the peace, to sweep the cruelty under the rug for the sake of the holidays. But the truth is, sending my own brother to prison wasn't me destroying my family. It was me taking out the trash to protect the only genuine family I had left. If you are sitting at a table with people who make you feel small, I need you to memorize these 3 strict rules for your own survival. Rule number 1. Blood is not a license for financial or emotional abuse. DNA does not give anyone a free pass to steal your peace or your property. Rule number 2. Silence is not loyalty. Sometimes protecting your family means grabbing a scalpel and amputating a toxic limb before the infection kills the entire body. Rule number 3. Never protect yourself with hope. Protect yourself with legally binding shields. Do not hope your greedy relatives will suddenly develop a conscience. Lock your assets behind ironclad legal structures, like an irrevocable trust. Make yourself bulletproof on paper. I am Nora. And for the first time in my life, I am completely free. Have you ever had to draw a brutal, unforgiving line in the sand to protect yourself or someone you love from a toxic family member? Did they try to use guilt to pull you back in? Let me know your story in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel for more stories of surviving the people who were supposed to love us.